Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Sweet Spot. This is your host, as always, Ryan Embry. So excited to bring you another episode and another part of our Hospitality Trailblazers series. If this is your first time, we've been running this Hospitality Trailblazers series for almost 2 years now, and we are interviewing some of the best and brightest in our hospitality industry, some of those people that are trailblazing a path forward. And we certainly have a guest today that fits the bill, Talene Staab, brand leader of Home2 Suites by Hilton. Talene, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
It's great to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
And we're excited to talk about the Home2 Suites brand and all the innovative and exciting developments that are happening with that brand that you are the head of. But before that, although this is not the first time I have met you, we were just talking off camera about how we met at the Hunter Hotel Investment Conference, had the pleasure to meet in person, even though we're doing this interview virtually. With this being your first time, Talene, tell us a little bit about your hospitality background, the journey that led you to Hilton, and ultimately the brand leader for Home2 Suites.
Sure. My parents had a little diner that was like a breakfast lunch diner in the Boston area. And I worked there in high school. And it was one of those places that was like Cheers, where no one ordered their food. They kind of like walked in and everybody knew, oh, Ryan's here. We might not have known your name, but we knew what you would eat for breakfast. And it was like
Yeah.
that sense of building community around a small business really stuck with me, even though it was hard work. And I just loved it. But I started working in hotels, and then my family actually moved from Boston to San Diego and relocated, and they stayed at this Embassy Suites, and they called and they were like, you will not believe this hotel. And this was like 30 years ago, so the
Yeah.
brand was relatively new. They're like, you get a suite in every room, you get free breakfast and free cocktails. And I honestly didn't believe it. They're like, you got to work here. So I did. I actually was a smart sales manager there, became a DOS, and then eventually joined the corporate team. And then when the corporate office moved to McLean, I moved back east with my family, young family, and we kind of looked at it as like an adventure. Let's just see what happens. And it ended up being a really good move, because from there I took on a ton of different jobs that kind of took me out of the brand and sales world into more operations. I got to be on the Canopy team. I joined like a week before we launched the brand. So learned
Yeah.
about new brand development, learned about owners. Development was the big learning curve for me, which was really exciting. And then that set me up to be the VP of owner relations, owner experience. And that was really cool because I got to see what Hilton looked like from the owner's point of view, like the whole elephant. Usually you just
Yeah.
get a
Yeah.
piece
We're
of
going to
it.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from that. We set up a ton of new systems and data and experiences for owners to really like bridge any gap that we might have had, because we were growing so quickly. And then that led me to True, which was my first brand leader job. I joined when we only had 60 hotels, grew to 220 in 3 years, which was tremendously fast. And then that all set me up for Home2. I've been on Home2 almost for 2 years. So
Wow.
been fun.
Yeah, quite a journey. I love the beginning of it because we talk about, there's some like catchphrases I feel like in hospitality when some people talk about like hospitality being in your DNA.
Yeah.
And that might be, that I think your story is one where you were kind of immersed into it at an early age, and you got that feeling of what true hospitality is. And as also someone in hospitality, when you get that feeling, it's kind of addictive. Like you want to serve others. You know what that experience is. Sometimes we get it on the other side, which is fantastic. Every traveler wants that, right?
Yes.
Is that great service or that great experience? Everyone
Yeah.
strives for that, but to be able to get both sides of the coin there is really, really cool, that you can offer that, and such a wealth of knowledge and experience in your journey with Hilton, which is really cool. We're going to talk about some of that, but let's get into Home2 Suites. All right. It's had some incredible growth. It's turned into one of the fastest brands in Hilton's history. To make sure I get these numbers right, with more than 650 open hotels. It's got one of the largest pipelines right now in the US. What do you think owners, developers love about this brand that has led to its exponential growth in such a short period of time?
Yeah, well, Hilton has had a long history in extended stay. We launched Homewood over 30 years ago. And if you think back then, it's quite an investment to build an all suite or an extended stay property. So when we
Sure.
built the brand in 2009, which was not a great time to launch a brand if you think about the world back then,
Right.
but it was a much more affordable build, much more economical to run. So it's really an alternative in a space that had been, much more investment heavy. And it was a slow burn because at the time we launched, we opened the first hotel in 2011. And you can kind of look at the trajectory. Before the pandemic, we were really hitting our stride. But what was interesting is during the pandemic, people really saw, across all extended stay, like that business was the lifesaver. It kept the lights on.
Yeah.
And once you kind of got through the worst part of the crisis, sports teams never stopped traveling the entire time. And so
Right.
people really valued space, value, the setup of having a suite like we have. So I think from an owner perspective, it's affordable. It's good for first time owners or experienced owners in the way it's prototypical. And I think a lot of people wanted extended stay in their portfolio to diversify a little bit. And from a guest perspective, I always laugh at owners. We just had an event last night, and owners who don't own a home too, but they're like, when I travel, it's my favorite brand. When I, stay with my family, I
Yeah.
laugh about, the guest sentiment and loyalty is incredibly strong. And I think owners feel confident in that. And Hilton just has a reputation for building successful brands. So I think owners feel confident in going into the segment maybe for the first time with Hilton. So for sure.
Yeah, it certainly does. And as we alluded to, I mean, hoteliers, owners, developers, they're all travelers too. So it is
Yeah.
fascinating to see that, that maybe they have exposure to the brand in a different light of being like, oh, I'm experiencing this as a traveler. I can see why there is such a draw here. Right. And I think things like, the pandemic, obviously, as we look back, it shows how durable an asset like a Home2 Suites can be, where we got to, you know, near the closest thing to zero occupancy as we could get, but there was still a demand for that type of stay, for that type of experience. And I think that says a lot. And, when you think about owners, developers wanting to make sure that they have a safe haven for assets. I think Home2 Suites certainly fits the bill there. But it's more than just the growth, the exponential growth, that hockey stick growth that we
Yeah.
were talking about. You guys are actually doing things. Some exciting developments on the design front that I think is also setting you up for future success. Talk to us a little bit about those prototype updates and why this is going to set the brand up for success moving forward.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is we know how to brand hotels. Like we know how to create differentiated experiences. When you've got so much growth with a brand like Home2, our owners have multiple Home2s, some of them, right? So you
Right.
learn so much from them because they've built way more than we ever have. So they're like, this is what we have experienced between the first one we built and then this one. These are some things that we've taken into consideration. So we've done things like remix the room mix. We've added more queens because again, if you think about families, teams, people with projects, um, those were more in demand. We stacked them over the lobby, so then that made the lobby space bigger and better. We found tons of efficiencies that we could do from the back end for operations. And it's important. I think we've also learned the team member experience is super important. So we want it to be easy to run a hotel. So back of house, breakfast, we've kind of reconfigured to make the flow better. But in the guest rooms, I think the key with Home2 is flexibility. Like it's flexible for a guest to stay there. You can use the curtain that divides the living room from the bedroom space. You can have a cooktop if you want or not. We've got a full-size fridge. We have more flexible storage. We have more kitchen counter space. So we just kind of refined all the things that we knew the guests really cared about and made it easier for owners to build it. So when you hit the balance of both of those, it's even better. We made the outdoor spaces even better for guests to, we call it grill and chill, which is really popular.
I
And
like that.
people
Yeah.
really use that outdoor space a ton.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
And you think about all these engagement points are where the team members can see guests and engage with them as much as they wish, as much as the guest wants to. So those are kinds of the things that have really, improved. We found some efficiencies too on some of our signature items, like the beacon is what Home2 is known for on the exterior. We found ways to make that a lot more cost effective to build. So again, focusing on better guest experience, better cost to build, and revenue maximization. Retail is another one. We doubled the retail space because our early prototypes didn't have as much retail. And we know guests are like now buying and enjoying things that they like from home in the hotel. So a lot of good tweaks, nothing materially different in a big way because the brand was already performing, the prototype's already
Yeah.
performing really well.
Well, I'm sure that's the luxury of having so many of these hotels open, right? Like you might have
Yeah,
one where you're saying to yourself, "Oh, I'm seeing this need or hearing this need from the guest of wanting more outdoor space." But is that something that's particular to this, particular segment of traveler? Is it for this location, right? Or it could be in Florida
right,
where the weather is a lot nicer, but you might
right,
not want to do that up north where and give a lot more outdoor space. But when you have so many locations, you can then say, okay, this isn't just a single trend that I'm seeing. This is a pattern, and these are the efficiencies. I think it's also brilliant you brought up staffing right now, which has continued to kind of plague our industry right now with staffing shortages, and it's a real issue for owners that have to staff these hotels, trying to find ways. To find efficiencies to make it easier for staff, because obviously the easier their job can be, the better they're going to serve their guests, the more they'll enjoy their experience at working at a brand. So absolutely brilliant in that regard. Uh, Obviously, a lot of growth domestically, but you have your eyes set on international growth. Talene, tell us a little bit about some of the markets that you see some opportunity and how the Home2 Suites brand can kind of make a splash there.
We launched in China a couple of years ago, and that was our first kind of big foray outside of the Americas. And that's been tremendously successful. We have over 50 hotels open there and many more slated. So that was kind of our first foray out, and was cool to see how we could interpret the brand for China and still make
Hmm.
it feel like a home too, but very relevant for the region. So now we're looking at Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Um, Heavy on the Europe, Middle East.
Yeah.
But they don't have as much green space like we do here in the States. A lot more
Mm,
adaptive reuse, in very dense metropolitan areas. However, that extended stay component is really untapped market for Hilton in the branded space. Um, so we took what is our 32 square meter suite and made it 25 square meters, or really tested the limits of how much can we compress it and make it work still with all of the components. It still very much looks like a Home2 suite, but for Europe,
sure.
different fit and finishes. They use the kitchen differently. We obviously changed the F&B, and we're super excited. We have Dublin signed and Istanbul, Turkey. And so having now some success early days with that, now we're also looking in the Caribbean and Latin America. So we've just launched our prototype there. Similarly, they kind of looked at the smaller footprint, but again, different fit and finishes for what works in that market. Interesting customer research on how they might use the spaces differently. And so we've modified that to be regionally appropriate. So we don't want to look like an American brand coming into a region. It's very regionally relevant. And so we're excited to see how that starts to develop. But like lots of exciting things. I think people really appreciate the concept. So just making it work in the regions, there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, what a cool inflection point for the brand to be
Yeah.
to having that type of growth. And, we talked about all of the design and prototype tweaks and changes with the last question, but now you're kind of at the starting point of that with these international projects, and being able to say, okay, let's get the feedback from the guests, the owners, so that we can, see what's really going to resonate in that market. So very, very cool to see. We'll keep our eye on that.
Yeah.
Coming back across the pond, so to speak, I had the opportunity to meet you, like I mentioned, and Isaac Lake, the brand leader
Yeah.
of Live Smart Studios, which is Hilton's newest extended stay brand. Talk to us a little bit about how this brand compares, maybe the traveler that this caters to, and the difference in guest experience. Because there, from one, as you mentioned, Hilton does a great job branding. So compare and contrast those two brands for me.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, for years, Hampton had been kind of our entry level brand. It gets to a point where it's performing so well, there's so much space below for, lower rated travel, and in a different chain scale. And that's how True launched. Similarly with Home2, if you're looking at the extended stay space, there was Home2, which is running very strong. I mean, we're at the 140 ADR for 2023. So as you can imagine,
Right.
there's a ton of business in extended stay that wants at a rate lower than that. So it naturally creates this white space that we're like, look, if people want that experience, they have to leave Hilton. And we know our honors guests are fiercely loyal. Home2 runs over 70% honors occupancy. And so we know they're leaving Hilton to have experiences and extended stay at a lower price point. It made so much sense to create something that's different in that space, and that's Live Smart. So it's much more studio apartment living versus the services that you would get at a hotel, like not that it's not a hotel, but with Home2. It's much more focused on the kitchen because the research showed that 94% of travelers in that true extended stay, we're talking 30, 60, 90 nights, cook. 94% cook in their
Wow.
room. So much more focused on that. And it's much more appropriate for the mid-scale segment for what you pay for in fit and finishes and the services that you get. So it's a very different experience. And I think we studied just to see what their overlap would be. And I think we found 15% of those true target guests for Live Smart have stayed at a Home2. So we're really looking at a market that we weren't getting with Hilton. So we're excited. And again, with Home2 punching above its weight class, there's a lot of space for the Live Smart guests. And we're excited about that.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive opportunity and an entry point into exposing a lot of new travelers, or
Yes.
new extended stay travelers into the brand, and then years down the line upgrade and say, let's start staying at the Home2 next
Yeah.
time, right? So I think it's absolutely brilliant, really exciting to see the progress and of that new extended stay brand, and again the overflow into Home2, and because we know how you spoke to how brand loyal Hilton honor travelers are. Um, you know, so I've had the opportunity to speak with you, Isaac, Alyssa over at Spark by Hilton. So I running through a really great gamut of brand leaders for Hilton, and I think it's so fascinating because you have such a critical job to do, have this balancing act. And we kind of talked about at the top of the episode about, you want to grow the brand, obviously, and you want an interesting product that owners and developers are going to show some interest in, and helping you grow. But you also want to make sure that it negatively impact the guest experience. And you want an experience that travelers are going to kind of keep coming back to. What tools, methods do you use to kind of first of all, get that feedback from
Right.
owners and guests, and then incorporate it into visions for the future for the brand?
I'll go back to something we were talking about at the beginning. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a highly franchised business. We want our owners to have trust and confidence and develop with us. We want to create strong and successful brands, but ultimately, it is about that spirit of hospitality, right? We want to have our guests feel that feeling of, we talk about spreading the light and warmth of hospitality. That's kind of the crux of what's driving our success. And so we have to really, as brand leaders, be the ones that are balancing the owner value proposition, the guest value proposition, and then our future to make sure our brands stay true and successful and differentiated so that we have room to grow other brands too. And there's, something for everyone. We are very close to our owner community. I mean, they have been critical in building these brands. A lot of it is, with a ton of their input. Otherwise, that's how you can kind of ensure success that way.
Right.
We take in a ton of guest feedback. So whether it's consumer research, like what I was referencing about extended stay cooking in their suites.
Yeah.
We have a new stay experience platform, which does guest surveying all the time. We definitely look for trends. We look at team member feedback because we were talking about staffing. I mean, we
Yeah.
look at things, we had our biggest GM conference of all time. We had, 6 brands represented. It was thousands of people, and we hadn't refreshed our uniforms in a while for Home2. We did a fashion show and had the leaders vote what were their favorites, and
Oh,
then
wow.
they got to see when it launched. They were like, we picked that. So we want them to feel part of it with us because they're the
Yeah.
ones that are delivering the service every day. So you can't forget about them. So there are a lot of places to get feedback, and I think if you're going to be successful as a brand leader, you have to keep the mission straight. What's the job of the brand? Who is it serving? What are we trying to accomplish? And use that filter to take in all the feedback to make sure you're doing the right thing, because everyone's got their agendas, right? So we have to just kind of make sure we've got the right proportion of feedback from all parties to make it right. Because, it's tough too when you think about like my early days with True. It was so different. The rooms are a lot smaller. It's much more efficient. The living room is the lobby, and that's where
You're right.
everyone hangs out.
Yeah.
But people wanted it to feel like Hampton in the beginning because that's what they knew, and that's what was like the
Mm.
gold standard to compare it to. And so we really had to tell owners, you got to stick with us, stick with the plan. We have this like plan, it's going to work. And it took a minute for us to find the true guest and for people to stop comparing it to Hampton, which is of course what you would expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was the key to the success of True is that it is different than Hampton. So it's a
Yeah.
whole different traveler that's like, I found my place. So we find that with each of our brands, but it's not easy to
Yeah.
stick to the plan when people are, expecting it to be something. So there,
It's so fast. Yeah, you're
yeah,
absolutely. It's so fascinating because I never thought about that. You're right because there might be some initial feedback right off the bat that you're saying, that people are calling for changes. This isn't working, but it's like you also have to have a little bit of a runway with these brands
you have to
about
have a
saying
run.
we've got to get this off the ground. We have to truly see if this is something that sticks. Because you're right, there could be a comparison, but that's the whole reason you created the new
Yes,
brand, right? Is
that's
for
right.
it to not to feel like that. So,
Yeah,
absolutely fascinating point there.
yeah,
And then, obviously throw in a black swan event like, what happened in 2020, and that shifts everything, right? Because now
everything.
the
Yeah,
guest experiences, I used to want to go out and, uh, it, for a couple of years, I was actually just staying in my hotel. I didn't want to go anywhere, experience anything.
right.
And now all of a sudden, a couple of years later, I want to get back out. So you have to see, okay, what is that? We always talk about that new normal. What does
Yeah.
that feel like, and how can you make changes? So, yeah, very very difficult job you must have over there doing that balancing act. But
It's fun though, and you want to think of how do you evolve it and
yeah,
keep and that's why if you know your brand's core, you can still keep the spirit, the essence, the intentions of it, and still continue to evolve into what like you said, the new normal is, and then continue to be successful that way.
yeah, I think that's a great point, even for our hotel listeners. Down to the individual property level. That of just knowing what your business is, who you cater to, and making sure you kind of stay in your lane in a sense of
And
just having a clear vision. Because if you try to stray too far away from who you are, uh, guests, travelers, they're going to see that. They're savvy. Travelers have gotten a lot more savvy. They had to over the last couple of years. They know they have more options than ever, and there's more flexibility. So it's going to be the brands that kind of stay true to who they are, and deliver that consistent experience, that are going to thrive. And I think Home2 Suites and has done a fantastic job, and you can see, mission accomplished on the other side of that. And that's seen as its tremendous growth. So I want to get back to your experience, Talene, because I think you've got a really unique story, because you talked about Canopy, True, Home2 now. Share a little insight of knowledge from going to a brand like True. You kind of spoke to a little bit of the challenges off the beginning, but launching a new brand like a Canopy when back in the day, to now having kind of an established mission and brand that you're the head of, and how that has served you in the position you're in today.
It's funny, as I was thinking about it, Canopy was right at launch. When I joined True, it was kind of in the toddler years. And then with Home2, it was much more, I'll say teenager. I won't say grown up, because it was still feeling really, it still feels new.
Yeah.
And, we haven't even been through like full renovation cycles yet. So it's like, relatively new, but it is a
Yeah.
different perspective, right? For each. And like at launch, when you launch, you're really like, you have all these theories and concepts of how it should be. But when it gets out in the wild and you hear, what owner developer feedback is and what they want to do and how they want to achieve the same goal, but maybe they want to go about it a different way. So that's important to listen to. When I think about my time with True, I kind of alluded to, it's like sticking to the plan and let
Yes.
it work first, and then completely make changes, which we did. But you
Yes.
got to give it a chance to stand on its own. And again, from a branding perspective, I appreciate when there are things that make people, talk about it. Like with Home2, we joke about, we have a curtain that literally divides the living room and the bed space. Some people love the curtain, some people hate the curtain, but the people that love the curtain more than people that don't like the curtain. And so that is like the most important piece of value real estate. Like if you have a little kid that's trying to sleep and doesn't want to be staring at the parents, to see if they can stay up a little long, that curtain is
Yeah.
valuable. So like there are these things that you kind of need to listen to and let that work. But what's important is throughout all of it, you have to have, a good relationship with the owners and developers and a trust that we're all kind of working towards the same goal of success, because then you can have really good discussion and candor in your conversations to make the best product. So I feel like those relationships throughout all of the stakeholders in branding is super important. The owner developers, the team members, and of course you got to, stand by the guests and what they ultimately want. So it's been good to see it with brands from different stages, and then as you look at older brands that are looking now for how do we get owners to reinvest and keep the products fresh. I look at, sometimes, we ask a lot of our owners, but the returns and the premiums that we drive with our brands, there's a reason for it. And it's not
Mhm.
always the easy way, but like there has to be that trust that we're aiming for retaining that premium. So I think it's kind of goes back to maybe what you said is from my experience is like take in all the feedback and then measure it against, what your intentions are and what your goals are. And then you'll know
Yeah,
what to do. And
sure.
talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. I think a decision like that, the curtain is a great parallel, by the way, as because you're right. It's like I could make this change and it would impact a segment of traveler that might, you know, be happy that this curtain's gone, but it's going to have a bigger impact on those that really depend on that for a reason like you pointed out. I think that that's a brilliant point. And, especially we preach all the time, being a digital marketing podcast, that you have to listen to the data. The data is going to show you some trends, but I also think you can't always be changing, especially as a brand. You can't make, one day people like the curtain or don't like the curtain, so you remove it, and then they're calling for, some more privacy, or they wish they had that, and then you put it back in. That creates inconsistencies, and what we talked about is right now travelers are looking for consistent experience with these brands. So I think it's a fascinating subject. I could talk more on it, but you talked about, or we've talked about rather, the large pipeline that Home2 Suites has. Any exciting projects that you're working on right now that you can share with our audience?
Um, I'm really excited about Bristol, Connecticut, because it's going
Okay.
to round out our continental US.
All
It's
right.
our 49th state, and then hopefully we'll hit Hawaii in 2026, and we'll have all 50 states. That's exciting. I'm excited about Austin. East Side will be in the heart of Austin there. We've got a Virginia Beach project, or Napa. I mean, who doesn't want to have a hotel in Napa Valley?
That's
There's,
exciting. Right.
there's a lot, a lot of exciting things there. We also, from a product perspective, again, I'll go back to listening to guests. You know, we're doing some fun things at breakfast. It kind
Okay.
of goes back, like, guests want consistency, but they also want flexibility, right?
Yes.
So they want things their way. So we're doing some fun, we've been really successful with offering these breakfast sandwiches. They're um, delicious. There's very many kinds, but guests still want more flexibility. So we're testing out a build your own breakfast sandwich kind of pilot.
Okay.
It's just kind of a nod to, like, this is how you can keep um, the signature item, but maybe do it a different way that makes the
Yeah.
guest happier. And then if the cost per occupied room goes down, which early indications show it is, everybody wins. So I think that's the fun kind of things where you're solving a problem and everyone wins. I mean, ultimately that's where we're going for. So, and then be able to deliver it at over, 650 hotels the same way. That's the fun
Right.
part.
Yeah, that's the challenge. But yeah,
Yeah.
personalization. I mean, that's a huge thing
Yeah.
right now. I think that resonates on both ends. I'm hearing some brand leaders saying, there's a specific piece of, there might be one or two specific pieces of a new build that the owner is going to have exact say, and it might be because of a local artist that they put in the lobby or something like that. So there's some personalization there, so it doesn't feel like, so cookie cutter. But also on the guest side too, I think you can have a consistent guest experience with personalization there. If you have a seasonal drink at your F&B station, or you have a seasonal breakfast item or something like that, there's consistency. If your guests know that there's going to be some seasonal option there, um, that is consistency, even though it's ever changing, if that makes
Right.
sense. to,
Yeah.
to hopefully I didn't confuse our audience too much, but I think when you offer that flexibility, as you mentioned, that's where the pieces of the guest experience just get kind of those notches a little bit higher and higher, and you see that reflected in your online presence, your reviews, and ultimately kind of word of mouth. So
You
um,
probably traveled a lot. And I mean, I'm sure there's days where you're like, I don't remember which hotel I'm in, what key. You've got keys, but you're like, I can't remember what room I'm in. Like, you're in
sure.
a trance sometimes when you're traveling, week after week. And so when there are things that kind of break you out of that by reminding you what location you're in, or team members that kind of did things a little differently,
Yeah.
like, those are moments of making it stick with you that I think matter in service. And I think people think of service as, like, there's so many ways, it's always above and beyond and adding more stuff. It's really about, kind of, I look at it like breaking the monotony of travel week in, week out, by having something that maybe lets you know, hey, you're in this specific city
Yeah.
today. Like,
Yeah.
enjoy this. You can only get it here. Or the way the team talks to you about their location. So there's, like, all kinds of ways that you can achieve that through hospitality.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. And again, being a digital marketing podcast, we share that about social media and making sure that on social media you are highlighting those things because you're absolutely right. Doing research now, it might feel you're going to a market, you're brand loyal. Well, guess what? There might be four or five, of this brand in a certain market. What's gonna kind of break the mold, as you say, or kind of break you out of that trance of I'm just traveling here for business. No,
Right.
this is going to be a unique experience that sticks with me. So when I travel to another market, that might, for some reason, that might just click subconsciously and say, I want to stay at another Home2 Suites.
Good
So
experience.
yeah, exactly. Um, Now, Hilton, known for its innovation, recently just named by Fast Company's most innovative companies of 2024, the only hotel company to be recognized with that award. One of the innovative features you're looking to implement by the end of 2024 is the guest ability to text on property requests. I think this is become more and more of a need and want from guests. Talk to us about the importance of implementing new technology and how guest communication preferences have really evolved over the last couple of years.
I'll go back even further. It's pretty incredible. And if you haven't figured out by my timeline yet, I've been with Hilton my entire life. So I've seen a lot of things. But I remember when we installed, it was called OnQ as our PMS system.
Yeah,
Back then, and it was a big deal to get everyone on the same platform. But we saw way back then that if we could do that, it was going to allow us to do things wide scale, such as digital keys. So now you can check in, choose your room, check in advance, bypass the front desk if you want. And I remember how people were freaked out that they were going to be like, you're getting rid of front desk team members. Well, now how great is it that people that don't want to talk to the team members are not taking up space on the line in the queue, freeing up your hours. And then the people that do want to talk to the front desk now have the flexibility because there isn't a queue of people waiting
right.
to check in. So digital key has been incredible that we can offer at all of our hotels. The messaging, again, it goes back to like really things have changed. People expect a lot and they want to not have to call somebody and talk to. I mean, if you talk to young people, it's like picking up the phone is like typing a letter, and sending a telegram. It's like that never
Yeah,
happened to call anyone. So being able to message, we're really excited about. We've had a lot of hotels been doing it for a long time, but to do it wide scale across the board will be another guest expectation. And I think team members are super excited about it. Guests are excited about it. When you think about other innovations, connected room, people want to be able to stream their stuff to
yes,
watch. They're binging something, they don't want to stop binging when they get to a hotel. So being able to see your content in your rooms, and we have connected room everywhere, is another element. So I think it's really important to stay on the front of those innovations. As you go, because guests expect it, and they don't want to feel like traveling should be a hardship compared to what they get at home. Like we want them to have like an at-home experience.
right.
So what can we do to have those creature comforts follow you with you as you travel? I mean, that's the way we're going. And Hilton's done a great job of continuing to stay on the front of that and keep testing new things, including
Yeah.
texting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think here. What you just said was a great point of you're trying to take the home experience, home to the brand, obviously, correlation there. You're trying to take the home experience, put it into a hotel. I don't know if I'm trying to think of, even at work now, I don't have a physical phone, but I think the only time I pick up a phone now is at a hotel. Like I
Right,
physically pick up a phone is at a hotel to do some of these requests. So
right.
this is something that we've seen just all, not just in traveler space, but just every day. So it's so exciting to hear that this was a great example of listening to guest feedback, but just seeing how our lives technology has evolved to the point where, okay, this is one of the last places where you're picking up a phone. Now you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you're
Now
right.
you can, yeah, now you can text our associates and we're just going to have everything for you because you're doing most of the texting, anyways,
Anyway,
with your communication. So,
exactly.
um, as we wrap up here, Talene, I'd love to hear, you know, do a little predictions here for the next 5 years with Home2 Suites. What do you envision? What's your vision as the brand leader?
Well, I'm really excited, like I said, to hit all 50 states.
Yep.
I'm really excited to see how our European growth picks up because I feel like there's a lot of potential there. Same with the Caribbean and Latin America. Um, and I'm really excited about just the momentum that we've built. I mean, our numbers are incredibly strong, but I feel like we're still on the hockey stick of growth. And I love that new guests are discovering home too, that haven't yet stayed yet. Our numbers are, we have really strong occupancy, but there's still a lot of people that haven't experienced home too yet. So I'm really excited for the potential of the rest of the guests that haven't yet found us to try. And I really get excited about meeting new owners too and developers that are getting into the space, and Home 2 is perfect for them to try that out and join us. So there's still a lot of upside on a brand that's already doing incredibly well. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you've got there's definitely more meat on the bone on both, like you said, the owner developer side as well as new guests exploring and experiencing this brand for the first time, and hopefully becoming advocates and users again and return guests. So really exciting there. We'll see how you take this as we called it, mid teenage year brand as it goes out of its adolescence into young adulthood. So
I have
excited.
two teenagers in real life, so I'm hoping I do a better job with them than I do with them. We'll see. Well, ask me in a couple of years.
Okay, well, we'll have you back on for sure. Well, I want to thank you, Talene, for hanging with me on the sweet spot. Want to thank our
Pleasure.
audience for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time on the sweet spot.